This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi asks the international community to do more to help Africa resolve its conflicts. We update you on the surge of migrants from Morocco and the response from Spanish authorities in Ceuta. And we look at what museums in Uganda are doing to lure visitors back amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Ramanyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. South Africa's headline inflation jumps to a 14-month high. We'll have the numbers. And Tunisia's pandemic-hit economy contracts by 3% in the first quarter of 2021. We'll have the details on those stories and plenty more coming you in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. China has hosted a UN Security Council meeting on peace and security in Africa. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi called on the international community to help Africa's development.
It calls on the international community to give stronger support to Africa in such areas as COVID response and reconstruction, trade and investment, debt relief, food security, poverty alleviation, climate change, and industrialization, and put resources to places where Africa has the most urgent need.
Wang Yi also stressed the importance of efforts to prevent the negative impact of the pandemic on Africa's peace and development. He also offered a few proposals to help African countries combat the virus. Wang Yi said the international community should provide Africa with medical supplies and technology and make vaccines more accessible and affordable. He also urged the international community to help Africa enhance its prevention and control systems. The root causes of conflict within Africa was another major focus of the meeting. Wang Yi said to enhance peace, it is important to promote African solutions for African problems and continue peacekeeping funding for the continent.
Regional and sub-regional organizations in Africa should be encouraged to further play their leading role in securing political settlement and the peace and reconciliation process. It is important to actively channel peacekeeping funding to Africa and give more support to AU peace operations in order to help Africa enhance its capacity of maintaining peace and stability and fighting terrorism.
While insecurity in Africa has been a major challenge for many decades, and solid strategies to address the root cause of conflicts will be highly welcomed across the continent. CGTN's Nick Mudimba has more details.
Conflicts, deadly terror attacks and even wars have slowed down the development of several African countries. This has led to humanitarian crises in several parts of the continent. The United Nations Security Council has condemned such attacks and killings. It now wants to find solutions to the conflicts across the continent.
I'm happy that the UN Security Council is having that recognition that Africa is fairly much now where the war theater is with regards to the transnational crimes, and some other crimes like terrorism is taking center stage. And fairly much, when we were dealing with the Islamic states, I think this, as it was fairly much done in the other spaces in the Middle East, that's when the international community started to have a look at what could be happening in Africa. And fairly much, this is a threat that's now getting deeply rooted in Africa because of those weaknesses in governance and where there are porous borders.
While focus remains on promoting peace and security in Africa post-pandemic recovery, is also part of the Council's agenda. Terrorism and violent extremism are arguably Africa's greatest security threats in 2021. Local groups with international terror links are embedded in East, West and Southern Africa. The activities often lead to local conflicts and enable organized crime rackets, destabilizing already fragile political landscapes. Some of the African countries in active conflict hotspots include 3 countries of the Central Sahel, that is Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. Others are the Central African Republic, Somalia and now Mozambique, which is experiencing a crisis in Cabo Delgado.
Terrorism anywhere on earth is terrorism elsewhere on earth. Right now, the baselines have moved. Any threat that's happening somewhere else is not private and personal anymore. They are both very public and global in impact.
Type of conflicts being experienced in Africa are inter-ethnic conflicts, interstate conflicts, liberation conflicts, civil rights conflicts, and political transition conflicts. State Council and Foreign Minister of China Wang Yi will chair the open debate, which is one of China's signature events during its May presidency of the Security Council. A presidential statement may be adopted in connection with the meeting. Nick Mudimbo, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
We earlier spoke to Dr. Andrew Atta Asamoah for more perspective on this issue. He's the head of Africa Peace and Security Governance Program at the ISS. Here is what he had to say.
I think that if you look at all the drivers that we see on the continent, it ranges from political issues to identity issues, to issues of natural resources, all the way through to issues of marginalization. In terms of causes, the key issues that we need to put priority on has to do with governance issues, because at the end of the day, they are the main drivers of the many issues we have on the continent. But in terms of geography, I think we really need highlight of the many issues in the Sahel region of the continent. We've also seen escalation of insecurity in the southern part of the continent around Mozambique. So that also needs massive prioritization. The Horn of Africa certainly needs so much focus. Even though Somalia has made some progress, there's really need for us to sustain the progress there. So the Horn of Africa, and in some parts of West Africa as well. So those are the areas we need to put focus. So far, we can praise some of the homegrown solutions at the level of the African Union in terms of trying to operationalize the African Standby Force, but also preventive diplomacy at many levels, even regional engagement, and some very robust actions by some member states. But that is woefully inadequate if you compare that to the nature and gravity of the issues we have on the continent. What that means is that external support is incredibly important. Now, the main point here is that, insecurity everywhere in the world nowadays is insecurity everywhere. So as much as Africa may be hosting these conflicts, it's also important for the world to know that insecurity in Africa is as much insecurity in any part of the world. That calls in actors like the United Nations, as much as the United Nations also has a primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. So there's something happening in Africa, but that is inadequate. And I think that calls for support from all actors in this sense. I think we need to be realistic. The main thing that the COVID has brought to bear is that it's more than a health situation. And so what we need to do is, first of all, at the national and regional levels, understand that COVID is much more than a health crisis. We need to look at it as a holistic situation that requires us to look at the security dimension of it. As you indicated, and rightly so, there's been a worsening of several indicators of insecurity across the continent. And so that has to be part of the robust response. As much as the economic variables are important, because if we don't get the economic recovery right, then all the drivers of insecurity associated with socioeconomic situations might force an increase in insecurity as well. So we need more of a holistic solution, particularly when it comes to the creation of jobs, so that we can address the youth question that we have on the continent.
Africa has so far recorded 4.6 million COVID-19 cases. While governments are working hard to curb the spread of the virus, the emergence of new variants and delayed vaccination is a major concern. Angela Coppola has more on this.
Experts are now saying that many hadn't anticipated the impact that the variants would have on infection rates and the ability to respond to them.
What we're now seeing are at least 4 variants of concern around the world, and all of them have spread rapidly. So they're not, even if they start in one country, they are not going to be confined to that country. And they are going to be able to pick out susceptible populations in other countries as well. As long as we are not immunizing populations in all countries of the world, these variants will continue to emerge. As long as they continue to emerge, they will pose a threat even to vaccinated communities.
People are anxious about the variants and most want a vaccination to protect themselves and their families.
No, I mean, everybody's cautious. I don't think there's anything we can do about it. It's going to come and I don't think it's going to stop. I think we're going to keep getting variants. Hopefully we can all at some point get a decent vaccination, which I think will go a long way to giving us some sort of protection, which is probably better than no protection.
Continental health authorities have been advising people to take non-medical precautions to protect themselves, washing hands, wearing masks and social distancing.
I think the most dangerous place to pick COVID up is a shopping centre. You go and touch all the stuff on the shelves, pick things up, have a look at it, put it back. You don't know, but I mean, I go into shops, sanitise my hands, I wear my mask and hope for the best. That's about as far as I can take it, I reckon. Got to get on with life.
The key impact in many African countries has been on the economy, with many businesses battling to keep their doors open when lockdowns have been imposed.
International travel is restricted at the moment, so I'm not really worried about it. But we're taking all the necessary precautions that we always have, because we've been open right throughout the lockdown. So we're doing the usual things like sanitize hands as we come in, social distancing, like temperatures of staff members and all that on a daily basis.
But is enough being done to bring the pandemic under control on the continent?
The real strides that's been incredibly important is in partnership with the World Health Organization and other global agencies, that countries have been able to use tools that evaluate their readiness to receive vaccines and to be able to distribute them. Having a vaccine is one thing, but having programs that are able to distribute to remote areas and to populations of adults not previously immunized is a real challenge and costs both money, but also a lot of human resource and organization.
Analysts will tell you that there's a big discrepancy in terms of getting access to vaccines between the richer nations and the poorer nations. And most of those poorer nations are on the African continent. And it's not expected to change anytime soon. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, the much anticipated second phase of South Africa's COVID-19 vaccine is underway. The expanded drive will focus on remaining healthcare workers, older adults and vulnerable groups as a third wave of the pandemic sets in. South Africa's cumulative cases stand at over 1.6 million, with over 55,000 deaths and a 94% recovery rate. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
It's been a long wait for COVID-19 vaccines for South Africa's old and vulnerable. But there was hope nationwide as the country's second phase kicked off from Tembisa Township to the Western Cape.
I'm so happy, I'm so grateful in my heart, and I'm not scared because we see a lot of people that are dying, and the people are saying, don't do this and this, they're gonna kill you. There's no such. So I'm happy.
Now there's a life. We need that life, you know. That's it. And we are happy because the government did everything to be successful.
The process here is very, very good. It's well planned, well organized. You don't waste any time, you know, and just to think, just this short time, you have this to save your life with. And I really would encourage people to do it.
Close to 500,000 healthcare workers were jabbed in the opening phase with the single-shot Johnson & Johnson's vaccines. Almost 90 vaccination centers were added for the second phase, where the first two-shot Pfizer doses have been administered.
I think even if it's 2 shots, as long as those 2 shots will protect me from this COVID-19.
I'm not happy about it. I thought I was going to get Johnson & Johnson once because, you know, we elderly people, sometimes we got an appointment at the clinic. It clashes with an appointment that they give us here.
There's still much work to be done, however, to boost registration numbers around the country.
We have had our community health workers who, even today, you know, quite a number of them are out in communities. They are walking door to door as part of helping the elderly to register. But all these methods, they are technical methods, meaning that young people can easily do that. But those that are 60 and above, they may struggle a little bit.
After months of planning, South Africa's second phase has kicked off smoothly as the country aims to vaccinate 5 million elderly people by the end of June. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
France says it will work towards persuading rich nations to reallocate $100 billion to African states by October. The funds are expected to come from the IMF's special drawing rights monetary reserves. President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement in Paris, where he was hosting several African leaders as well as representatives from the World Bank and the IMF. The gathering was aimed at discussing financial support and investment for African economies to help them recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Jen Keo has more.
Compared to other regions around the world, Africa has been less badly hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. But the meeting in Paris was dominated by fears of the pandemic's aftermath. While richer nations are busy launching economic recovery packages, African nations say they lack the means to follow suit. And a slow vaccine rollout has raised fears that new COVID-19 variants could emerge and devastate the continent.
There's not enough mobilization on that side to be vaccinated from our populations. It's a certain anxiety that is due to the fact that, in my opinion, the vaccine comes from elsewhere. That's why it's necessary to aim for vaccine production in Africa. I think that we will have a fairly big impact on people's attitudes.
We have a common responsibility. Vaccinating our own populations for industrialized countries does not guarantee them any health security. It's obvious that if we continue the current trend of 2% or 3% of Africans being vaccinated, extremely resistant variants will develop on the African continent.
Economies in sub-Saharan Africa shrunk by 1.9% combined in 2020 in an unprecedented recession. The International Monetary Fund warned that Africa faces a shortfall of $290 billion up to 2023. This will undermine all development efforts. France has been pushing for support for African economies.
The first initiative is a very strong initiative to massively produce vaccines in Africa, for Africa, and therefore to develop, through financing and industrial partnerships, a capacity to produce all types of vaccines in Africa.
France and other European countries say they are ready to contribute, and a discussion is starting, especially with the United States, to reach a deal by this autumn. But so far, leaders at the summit have agreed to leverage on the international financial system to create the much-needed fiscal space for African economies and restructure debt for many African countries.
We are ready to reallocate some of the special drawing rights that France will hold so as to have a financing round that will amount to at least $100 billion for Africa. This means we need to more than triple Africa's usual appropriation when this emission of SDR takes place.
Leaders at the summit have welcomed the moratoriums and say they will use the resources effectively and transparently. Jean Keo, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Chinese and Russian presidents virtually witnessed the launch of a new joint nuclear power project. And we update you on the surge of migrants from Morocco and the response from Spanish authorities in Ceuta.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday attended a groundbreaking ceremony via video link of a new nuclear power project between the two countries. Both leaders said the project marks a new high point for bilateral ties. CGTN's Chuck Tinte has more.
A step forward for China-Russia relations. The two countries launched their biggest nuclear energy cooperation project to date. They're now jointly building 4 units at 2 power plants in China. Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin witnessed via video link the groundbreaking ceremony for the project. Xi says he hopes the project will set a good example for global nuclear safety and that the two countries will continue to improve their nuclear technology to serve environmental protection, medical service, and energy sector. Both leaders underscore the importance of nuclear energy cooperation in fighting climate change, as Putin says the project will also help China's goal in achieving carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. In 2018, the two countries agreed to work together to construct 2 reactors at the Tianwan nuclear power plant in eastern China's Jiangsu province and 2 at the Sudapu nuclear power plant in northeastern Liaoning province. Under the agreement, Russia's state-run nuclear company Rosatom has already begun construction in March 2021 on the Tianwan plant's 7th unit. Construction of the 8th unit will begin in 2022. While in Sudapu power plant, Rosatom will supervise construction of the 3rd and 4th units. The new reactors at the 2 plants will use the 3rd-generation nuclear power technology. Compared with 2nd-generation units, the prevention of accidents is a prerequisite for the design of 3rd-generation nuclear power plants. These new units can also significantly reduce the emission of radioactive materials. Tianwan Units 7 and 8 are expected to be commissioned in 2026 and 2028, while Sudapu Units 3 and 4 are scheduled for a commercial operation in 2028. After completing the construction, the power supply capacity of the 4 units will sustain life for about 4 months, or even more for a city with a population of 20 million people. Chuck Tinte, CGTN.
The Spanish government says nearly 5,000 migrants have been returned to Morocco. This comes after around 8,000 migrants made their way to the Spanish enclave of Ceuta. Ashtatal has that update.
From the shores of the Spanish enclave of Ceuta, thousands of migrants are being returned to Morocco. They had swum ashore across the border fence on Monday and Tuesday. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez vowed to quickly restore order.
We are proceeding with the immediate return of those who have entered illegally. About 4,800 people have already been returned to Morocco after entering Ceuta illegally 2 days ago.
Some analysts say rising diplomatic tensions between Spain and Morocco could be at the center of this latest influx of migrants.
Let's remember the border with Ceuta is not only the border between Morocco and Spain, but it's also a European border, and consequently the lack of control in this case by the Moroccan authorities isn't only a lack of respect towards Spain, but also towards the European Union as a whole.
In the meantime, Morocco has reportedly recalled its ambassador to Spain for further consultations. Astatal, CGTN.
While Ceuta is recognized as part of Spanish territory, it is actually on the African mainland. The city of over 80,000 is connected to Spain via ferry services. The ferries regularly cross the Strait of Gibraltar. The area has been under Spanish rule since the 17th century. After gaining independence in 1956, Morocco claimed a sovereignty over Ceuta and 5 other territories, but Spain still exercises control. For years, migrants have reached the cities of Ceuta and Melilla by swimming along the coast or scaling the tall border fence. For the last few decades, both cities have become a popular route for migrants seeking to enter Europe. Well, earlier we spoke to Naim Jena, the Executive Director, Afro Middle East Center, about the impact of the latest events. According to him, there is a need for the world to shift how it tackles the issue of migration. Let's see what else he had to say.
Well, what is really required is a complete kind of global change in the way that migrancy or human mobility is discussed and is dealt with. The manner in which, particularly with Europe, this kind of fortress Europe that has been created, which is only for Europeans and everyone else should be kept out, etc., is part of the problem. I mean, when the discourse that we talk about, says the problem of migrancy, it's not the problem of migrancy, it's the problem of Europe trying to create a fortress to keep people out. After, of course, they had colonized vast parts of the world, then to keep those people out of it. And there's no real reason for this, frankly, considering that in Europe, birth rates are as low as they are, population is decreasing, etc. So what's the point of wanting to keep migrants out, except a kind of racism and xenophobia? Europe is the problem. Europe is not the victim in this. The victims are migrants who are looking for a better life, who in many instances are looking for a better life because of war, poverty, etc. in their own country, often created by having been created by European powers, and then they end up drowning in the Mediterranean. And that's why I say we need a whole new understanding of what human mobility is about, and a buy-in from global powers particularly about how the issue is going to be dealt with and how humans should be allowed the right to be mobile between nation states.
Egypt has meanwhile announced a $4.5 billion arms deal with France. The move has once again highlighted the depth of military cooperation between the two countries. The deal will help expand Egypt's collection of French Rafale fighter jets to about 54 planes. CGTN's Adel Mahroui tells us more on the significance of this deal.
In Paris, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met on Monday the CEO of Dassault Aviation, Eric Trappier. The French company is the manufacturer of the Rafale fighter jet. Egypt recently purchased 30 of these advanced long-range multitasking warplanes.
I believe the deal holds a message from Egypt to its regional rivals to highlight its military power. Rafale is an extremely advanced plane. It's considered a warplane in between the 4th and 5th generations. It is comparable to the US F-35, the Chinese G-20, or the Russian Sukhoi 57. They can enable Egypt to engage in war zones or hit targets far from its airspace reach. That enables Egypt to have the power to deal with the issues that threaten its national security, including issues like the Renaissance Dam.
The deal crowns an already fruitful relationship between Cairo and Paris. Regional conflicts saw the two stand on the same side in Libya and the Eastern Mediterranean exclusive economic zones. France is offering this $4.5 billion deal as a loan to Egypt with a 10-year payment plan.
The deal brings the two countries together in a long-term relation. It shows France's confidence in the Egyptian economy's strength, because the arms deal is a loan to Egypt. So it's a testimony by France that Egypt can pay back the debt. More importantly, there is confidence that Egypt will not practice policies that will challenge France in the region.
Egypt was the first nation in the world to purchase and receive the Rafale fighter jets when Dassault first offered them to a foreign nation. In 2015, Egypt purchased 24 jets. The deal announced this month will expand Egypt's Rafale fleet to 54 warplanes.
Since the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was elected in 2014, the former chief of military intelligence immediately began to diversify Egypt's sources of arms. The aim was to liberate the military from its heavy reliance on American weapons. France rose to be one of the biggest partners in this arms diversification program. Besides the Rafale, Egypt also purchased French naval frigates and defense systems. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
China is preparing to launch the Tianzhou-2 cargo spacecraft. Pre-launch function checks and rehearsals have been underway at the Wenchang spacecraft launch site in Hainan province. The cargo spacecraft will head to low Earth orbit to dock with the core model of China's space station. It will also deliver supplies to support future crewed missions. Latest reports indicate that the launch time has been postponed. Meanwhile, the China National Space Administration has released the first images taken by its Mars rover, Zhurong. It says Zhurong is studying its surroundings and performing tests. The rover is part of China's Tianwen-1 Mars mission that was launched in July last year. Tianwen-1 has been orbiting Mars since February, and its rover Zhurong landed on the red planet on May the 14th. And here's a quick recap of our top headlines. China has hosted a UN Security Council meeting on peace and security in Africa. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi stressed the importance of efforts to prevent the negative impact of the pandemic on Africa's peace and development. He also offered a few proposals to help African countries combat the COVID virus. France says it will work towards persuading rich nations to reallocate $100 billion to African states by October. The funds are expected to come from the IMF's special drawing rights monetary reserves. President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement in Paris, where he was hosting several African leaders as well as representatives from the World Bank and the IMF. And Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday attended a groundbreaking ceremony via video link of a new nuclear power project between the two countries. Both leaders said the project marks a new high point for bilateral ties. And that's a look at your headlines. Well, let's now go to Ramanyang for the latest business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. South Africa's headline inflation jumps to a 14-month high. And Tunisia's pandemic-hit economy contracts by 3% in the first quarter of 2021.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in South Africa. Headline inflation over there accelerated to a 14-month high of 4.4% in April from a reading of 3.2% in March. According to Stats SA, that is the highest since coronavirus lockdown measures were imposed back in April 2020. It does fall short, though, of the midpoint of the central bank's target range of anywhere between 3 to 6%. The increase was driven by higher transport prices. They were up 10.6% compared to a year ago. Fuel prices also reached their highest level on record, while the cost of food and non-alcoholic beverages went up by 6.3% year on year. South Africa's Monetary Policy Committee is expected to basically leave the benchmark rate unchanged at 3.5% this week. The governor of the Central Bank of South Africa said last month that policymakers will continue to maintain an accommodative stance to boost the prospects of an economic recovery in Africa's most industrialized economy. Still in South Africa, some of the latest macro data over there suggests a marginal increase in output in the first quarter of the year after the economy contracted by the most in a century in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Manufacturing and mining production and retail sales rose slightly in the 3 months through to March compared to the previous quarter. The country is also at the so-called virus alert level 3 for most part of Q1. The stats agency is scheduled to publish GDP data for the first quarter on the 8th of June, when it will drop the focus on annualized growth and change the base year for the data to 2015 from 2010. After contracting by 7% as the virus ravaged output and disrupted trade last year, the economy is expected to recover off that low base this year. The National Treasury is forecasting an expansion of about 3.9%, but it only estimates GDP recovering to pre-pandemic levels in late 2023. Bitcoin has plunged close to $30,400, continuing a major sell-off that started about a week ago. The digital currency is down by more than 30%, according to data from Coinbase. Now, that essentially means that Bitcoin has now pretty much erased all the gains, really, following Tesla's announcement that it would buy $1.5 billion worth of the cryptocurrency. Negative news over the past week has dampened sentiment around cryptocurrencies. Tesla's CEO, for example, Elon Musk, announced that the car maker had suspended vehicle purchases using Bitcoin on the 12th of May, citing environmental concerns about the highly energy-intensive mining process behind Bitcoin. Musk's comments caused over $300 billion to be wiped off the entire cryptocurrency market on that day. Back into the continent, Ethiopia has cancelled 27 mining licenses, actual mining licenses, not cryptocurrency ones, and it sent a warning to 3 companies in a move by the government designed to spur production. Authorities in Ethiopia now want to earn a lot more hard currency from the mining sector through better policy direction and more interesting partnerships with investors. From Addis Ababa, here's CGTN's Girum Chala.
The Ministry of Mines and Petroleum of Ethiopia had 97 registered mining companies working with it. From gold to petroleum to emerald and other precious stones, most are actively engaged in the sector. However, the ministry has just announced that 27 licenses have been revoked permanently as these companies were unable to enter into operation even though they have been supported and encouraged to do so based on the agreements they have signed with the government. According to Mines Minister Takala Uma, the license will be opened up to international tender soon enough. The minister emphasized the mining sector is assumed to be a leading sector when it comes to generating the much needed foreign currency for the nation. And over the last 10 months, the country has earned $514 million from the export of different minerals. The minister further said, through the work done over the past few months, gold is now a leading export commodity for Ethiopia, standing much higher than the traditional leading export of Ethiopia, coffee. Ethiopia has been pushing to develop its mineral and metal resource, citing mining as a key sector in its economic reform agenda. Grumtala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
On to North Africa now. The size of Tunisia's economic output contracted by 3% in the first quarter of the year compared to a year ago. That's according to the country's statistics agency. The tourism-dependent economy has been absolutely battered by a plunge in arrivals and forex inflows too due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's led to hundreds of thousands of much-needed job losses. CGTN's Adin Chouachi has the details from Tunis.
Economists in Tunisia say that this alarming decline in the growth rate is mainly due to the decline in the added value of the agriculture and fisheries sectors, which dropped by 6.7% at the end of March 2021. Agriculture is the lifeline of Tunisia's economy.
The data on agriculture and fisheries is terrifying. The decrease of 6.7% has never happened before over the last 4 years. Tunisia is preparing for the post-COVID recovery, but this will not happen without giving priority to agriculture, which is tied up to food security and the activity of the agri-food sector.
Analysts also warn that rising oil prices amid strong rebound in fuel demand on the international market pose a further risk to the country's economy. This follows the decision by the government not anticipating higher fuel prices while preparing Tunisia's 2021 state budget.
The government made a big mistake. The 2021 state budget was drafted on the basis of $45 for a barrel of crude oil. Now the price is over $65. It will soon reach $70. Tunisian population is paying for this difference with higher fuel prices. The state will also limit energy subsidies. This will cause the economy to shrink even further.
According to the monetary and financial indicators released by the Central Bank of Tunisia, tourism revenues edged down 55% during the first 4 months of 2021 compared to the same period in 2020. Tourism accounts for about 8% of Tunisia's GDP.
The pandemic has devastated the tourism sector. This vital industry cannot contribute to gross domestic product without an efficient vaccination campaign. Tourists are still hesitant to travel. Tourism revenues will not increase without an improved health situation, domestically and globally.
The mining sector's added value fell by 31% due to the decrease in the production of raw phosphate. Meanwhile, the added value of non-manufacturing industries rose by 11.5% in the first quarter of 2021, thanks to the increase in the added value of the oil and natural gas extraction sector by 26.1% and construction by 10.4%.
According to the National Institute of Statistics, the Tunisian economy recorded an unprecedented decline of 8.8% in growth in 2020 compared to 2019. The GDP also fell by 6.1% in the fourth quarter of last year compared to the same period in 2019. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
A couple of stories now on vaccination. The world's largest vaccine manufacturer, that's India's Serum Institute, says it will continue to prioritize India as the country suffers through a devastating wave of COVID-19 infections. Deliveries are now unlikely to resume until at least October. The World Health Organization-backed program COVAX facility is depending on getting nearly 1 billion doses of the shot developed by teams at AstraZeneca and Oxford University that the Serum Institute is licensed to make. The scheme had originally been expecting its largest supplier to deliver 110 million doses by May, but India halted exports back in March, and it started claiming those doses for use within the market as cases there exploded. And China's first homegrown single-dose coronavirus vaccine is now being rolled out. Shanghai authorities have been administering the single-dose shot against the coronavirus since Tuesday this week. Clinical trials suggest that the jab, developed by CanSino Biologics, it's known as Convidecia, has a 95% efficacy rate in preventing severe cases. Now, another one of its big advantages is easy storage. It's now playing a part in China's vaccination campaign, which has administered more than 422 million doses so far. All right, then I'll leave it there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. We'll be focusing a bit more on vaccine issues at 1800 GMT. Specifically, we'll be analysing the move by the EU to throw its weight behind a push to expand vaccine manufacturing in Africa. But how exactly will that happen? How much capital is on the table? And what is the personnel component needed to make that work? We'll have some answers for you live from London at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Beatrice.
Brahma, thank you. And we still have more news for you here in the program. Here's what's ahead. We look at what museums in Uganda are doing to lure visitors back amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To Kenya now, where health workers in the western part of the country are spearheading a COVID-19 vaccination drive. And as CGTN's Nick Mudimba reports, the initiative calls for some personal sacrifices in order to administer jabs to those in remote areas.
Kenya is currently facing a COVID-19 vaccines shortage. But despite that, health workers in the western part of the country are eager to ensure those in remote areas who can't access hospitals also get vaccinated.
We are giving a corona vaccine, the COVID-19 AstraZeneca vaccine. We do it at the station, and today we've decided to come at this center so that we can get the old people and give them vaccinations at the village. Most of them are not able to get the transport to the hospital. And we are as well trying to curb the spread of corona. So we are trying not to bring them to the hospital because of the crowd. So we are trying to get them at their villages and give them there.
The mobile vaccination drive has made it easier for villagers to get the jab without having to visit vaccination centers.
I received my COVID-19 vaccine today, and it's the best thing that has happened to us here in the village. It is hard to go to the hospital because we do not have money to travel, and sometimes we don't have time. So they have really done us a great favor and helped to make things easier for us here in the village.
I feel happy because I have been wondering when the vaccine will reach me. I was just hearing over the radio and didn't know whether it will reach those in the rural areas. So I feel really happy to have received the vaccine and would like the second dose too to be brought here so I can get it like today.
Kenya began vaccinating its population in March after getting slightly over 1 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccines. The vaccination process in the country has, however, been progressing at a slower pace due to lack of sufficient doses. The East African country has vaccinated less than 2% of its population. Nick Mudimba, CGTN.
In Uganda, the country's National Museum is slowly recovering from the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. With the dwindling numbers of foreign visitors, community-owned museums are helping to attract local Ugandans to historical sites, as Leon Sinyange tells us.
Artifacts depicting Uganda's beginning, from the Stone Age to the time of its traditional kings. In one of the rooms, a 1908 Ford Model T, first introduced to Uganda by the British colonial government before independence 60 years ago. Just some of the exhibits at Uganda's National Museum.
The exhibitions are targeting the indigenous person, the things we live with, the traditional music, and the traditional monuments that you find around the country. All these are things that describe Uganda as an indigenous community.
In celebrating International Museum Day on 18th May, the museum offered free entry to the public. There have been tough times through the COVID-19 pandemic. Officials here say there have been fewer than 200 visitors in total over the last 7 months. One way museum officials are hoping to entice visitors is by helping them better understand the African culture. These are raw beans and days-old roasted beef, a traditional food from the Toro Kingdom in western Uganda. The kingdom's traditional names and regalia are also on display here. Curator Atwoki Kaganda says community museums created by locals in specific areas are now the repositories for cultural history.
Culture is a missing link, in that these children, especially the new generation, are very much taken up by the Western culture other than their own culture, of which their own culture is their identity.
Elsewhere in the capital Kampala, Godfrey Kalule is also creating new experiences for the urban audiences.
We also expect antiques, all the items that, like all the money we have been using since independence, even that money we used before independence, even the cowrie shells, because the cowrie shells acted as the first medium of exchange, especially in Uganda. So someone gets a lesson of all the money we have been using.
30 such community-owned museums now exist in the country. Officials say these museums will preserve Uganda's heritage longer.
It's not that the National Museum can do everything across the country, but a community knows what they value, which we may not value.
The museums, often run by communities, provide a source of revenue. With the growing desire among Ugandans to exhibit their culture, many more are expected to emerge. Leon Sinyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. South Africa's figure skater Jean Quinn eyes qualification for the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics.
How would you create your legend. On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Aspiring Olympians are working a lot harder to achieve their dreams amid the pandemic. COVID-19 disrupted the sporting calendar, forcing many athletes to train at home. Top-ranked South African figure skater Jean Queen Isaacs has not let this deter her. She still has her eyes on qualifying for next year's Winter Games in Beijing. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Four-time South African figure skating champion Jean Queen Isaacs is confident and graceful on the ice. She tried on her skates when she was just 7 and at 16 hopes to become the first South African since 1998 to compete in the Winter Olympics.
For me, figure skating, it's the one place where I actually feel like myself. It's where I feel like I belong. It's taught me so much, where I know it's okay to make mistakes and we can grow from those, and we fall, that's how we learn. What it means to me is it's basically my home, away from home.
Isaacs remained optimistic through the lockdown despite not being able to train or compete. Since getting back onto the ice, her focus has been on next year's Winter Games in Beijing.
To be able to qualify for the Olympics, I think for anyone would be a proud moment, especially knowing that not many people have been able to qualify from South Africa, as we aren't as recognized as other countries. So to be able to qualify, it would honestly mean the world to me.
So if Jean keeps going in the direction that she's going and we stick to the plan that we have going forward, I think that Jean can really excel in the sport, and she could qualify for the Olympics and represent South Africa at the Olympics one day. She's definitely heading in that direction.
The champion skater hopes her success will bring a voice to the sport, which is hugely underrated in South Africa.
In South Africa, they call it a Cinderella sport. So it's frustrating because soccer and those things are recognized, figure skating isn't. So financially, it is quite difficult to fund skating. We have to do fundraisers. There are so many things that, as a figure skater, we have to sacrifice to keep the sport alive.
Jean Queen is hoping there will be an international competition that can enable her to qualify for the Winter Olympics and head to Beijing in 2022. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Sitani Thierry of Madagascar has been elected the new president of the African Judo Union in elections held during the body's annual congress in Dakar, Senegal on Tuesday. Sitani, who is also the president of the Malagasy Olympic Committee, defeated Chadian Olympic and Sports Committee President Abaka Jema for the position. Among the notable winners on the day was Kenyan Shadrach Maluki, who has been elected as the new chairman. The International Olympic Committee has reassured an anxious Japan that the Tokyo Olympics would be safe